Welcome to The Point. I'm Li Xin. My special guest today is Mr. Guixiang, Deputy Head of the Department of Publicity and the Department of United Front Work of the Party Committee of the Xinjiang Uygur Autonomous Region. Welcome, Mr. Xu. You have been at the forefront at the fight against disinformation against Xinjiang, and this has been a very difficult 3 years. What is the biggest challenge to your work?
我觉得最难的一件事情呢，是如何把真实的新疆呢，就传递给全世界。
I think one of the biggest challenges has been presenting a real Xinjiang to the world,
但为了做好这
so
个
that the world understands what is really going on here.
包括
In order to do that, we have to make a lot of efforts. One of the important measures has been to bring in international visitors.
邀请
Since the end of 2018, we have been inviting more people from all walks of life to visit Xinjiang, many of whom are Western journalists and journalists from non-Western countries. In terms of both the autonomous region and my own job, we sincerely welcome them to come and report on Xinjiang.
从自治区的角度来讲，从我的这个工作的角度来讲，我们是非常欢迎的。真实的新疆呢，就是摆在大家的面前。
Xinjiang is what people see it as.
那么他们竞
When Western media come, what's on their camera or what they learn should also be a very stable, peaceful, and well-developed Xinjiang.
祥和的、稳定发展的一个新疆。
However, that seemed not the case from what their
不是以
programs
后
showed.
从他们的这个节目当中，
I don't
反映出
think
的情
that
况来
was the
看
Xinjiang they
我觉得又
witnessed.
不是他们真正看到的
So
新疆
I feel there are still
从这
many
一点来讲，
obstacles
就是
when we try to present the real Xinjiang to the
还
world.
是怎么把这个传出去啊？中间还是有很多障碍在里头。
What are some of the specific obstacles you had to overcome? And why do you think there is such a gap between what the journalists write in their news story and what they found out here?
我想呢，这个可能还是有他们的一些固定的一些看法。
I think the stereotypes about Xinjiang are still there on their minds. We provided help to the best of our abilities after the reporters came. We were also in active contact with them to understand where they'd like to go. We did our best to get them there and show them the real Xinjiang.
很真实的啊，去展示。
But some videos released later were
那为
very
什么出去之后
unexpected.
就有了不一样的啊一些镜头，不一样的一些这个。
I think it's because some journalists may have an inherent bias, including ideological prejudice, or that they have a preconception or negative outlook when they came to Xinjiang. But a journalist's very basic job is to present the real Xinjiang,
这个
to show what they
最
have
基本的
seen.
讲啊，最基本的
We do not expect them to sing praises of Xinjiang.
真实的反映出去。
But
我们
what's
也
really
是
going on in Xinjiang, as long as they can tell a true story, then I think it's
说
worth
很
the
多赞
trip.
扬的话。但是呢，新疆的真实情况是什么？啊，只要把这个讲出去，我们就认为不虚此行。
Some people say there's no transparency in Xinjiang, that Western or independent journalists cannot come here and find out about the situation themselves. Therefore, they cannot trust anything that the authorities say about this place. Is there any restriction towards Western journalists to come and visit Xinjiang?
这个问题是说不允许来新疆，这个是不存在的。因为
It's
新疆
utterly
是
untrue that they're not allowed to come to Xinjiang.
而且呢，我们
As
一
part
直
of China,
抱着非常
Xinjiang is open to the
热忱的
world.
欢迎的态度。
We always
希望
welcome foreign media, including Western
国外的
media,
境
to
外的
come
媒
to
体
visit
包括西方
Xinjiang.
媒体多到新疆来
We hope they can come more
那么
often.
从实际情况来看，也有
What is actually
通过
happening is that they are visiting Xinjiang either through the arrangement of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign
安
Affairs
排来新
or
疆
they
参访
come
也有
on their
自己
own.
来新疆参访的。
Whichever
应
channel,
该说
they are
到
more
新
than
疆来之
welcome.
后啊，不管是哪种
For
情况
example,
我们都
the
是
BBC.
你比
They
如
had a
说
few journalists visit Xinjiang in May
那
2019.
BBC 呢是在2019年的5月份啊，他们几位记者呢到新疆来参访。
When the
然后
BBC journalists came,
来
we
的时候
talked to
呢，就
them
是
about their thoughts.
我们
When they
通过
asked
跟
for
他
help,
们
we
沟
were
通
very
啊
responsive in
也
getting to
征
know
求他
their
们的意见
needs.
他们也希望呢我们能
They
做一些
interviewed me
协助
about many
所以
issues.
呢我们就主动
They
地
asked me about my
积极地
views
跟他
on
们
the
进行
ethnic
沟通
issue in
包
Xinjiang.
括来了之后啊，对我进行了专访，还谈了很
We
多
also
问
talked
题
about anti-terrorism
那
and
么
religious
BBC 记者
issues. I gave them my views because I have some knowledge and understanding of the situation based on my long-term work experience here. After the interview, they said they agreed with some of my views. Then we asked them where they would like to go, and we try our best to help. They mentioned a few places. We arranged their visits, including one on the exhibition on Xinjiang's counterterrorism and de-radicalization efforts, to the Xinjiang Islamic Institute, to education and training centers, and face-to-face interviews with local people. They were very happy with the arrangements. They even told us before they left that it went beyond their expectations because they had a better schedule than planned. By the way, we did not interfere in any way with the BBC's reporting process.
另外一点呢，就是我们也没有对 BBC 的采访有任何的干预的行为。
There is also the worry or the concern that while they're gathering their news stories, interviewing people, because of the presence of people from your office or from the local authorities, the interviewees are not able to speak freely. Is that the case?
这个不存在。那么在采访的过程当中呢，实际上就是
It's totally untrue. In the process of reporting, when the reporter was talking to local people, we left them alone. Why? Because some media previously argued that if I or other Xinjiang officials were on site, we'd be seen as surveilling their reporting or hindering their work. So we intentionally avoided it, to give the journalists the maximum space to do their job freely. In fact, that's exactly what we did. At almost the end of the BBC team's trip, they requested an extra interview. We respected that and came back to Urumqi and let them stay around Kashgar and Hotan for more reporting. So, there was no interference or hindrance to their reporting. Based on my own experience, it's totally untrue that we interfered with their work.
干预或者阻碍BBC 采访这样他们的这些工作，这个问题是我认为是不存在的从我亲身经历来看，但是呢，从他们回去播出的。
However, when I watched their programs that were later broadcast, I was shocked.
因为从
The images they used were, for example, the education and training centers. Students in class, dancing, or their daily life, school scenes, and so on. But in the narration, they use words like concentration camps, persecution, and so on. Regrettable, that was my first response. Second, I didn't get it. Why did they thank us for arranging things well and assured us they had seen the real Xinjiang during our face-to-face talks, but fabricated the whole thing when they were gone?
在这儿跟我们面对面交流的时候，说我们安排的非常好，也看到了新疆的这个真实的情况。为什么回去之后，在镜头里却是这么去展现？
How much did he use of the conversation he had with you, and whether he gave true reflection, true representation of what you told him?
对话没有采用我的多少。
They did not quote much of what I said. Actually, for the limited conversation that I had with them, they managed to show some of my views. The key problem is that the BBC program shows normal teaching and living scenes of the education and training centers. But the narration is completely fabricated, using words like concentration camp. I think this contradicts itself and intends to mislead the audience. The footage and the narration do not match at all. So I think the program is a bad example.
好的所以我认为这个节目做的是不成功的
Well, such reporting is actually quite impactful. It attracts millions of clicks on YouTube, and when it's broadcast through BBC World, a lot of people around the world will be able to see it. What kind of negative impact has such reporting had on your work?
当然首先是严重的歪曲了事实因为新疆的真实情况
First of all, it seriously distorted the facts, because the real situation in Xinjiang is completely different. But since the BBC is an internationally established brand, This certainly created distortion about Xinjiang and seriously misled the world. However, I believe there are many well-informed people in the world who have objective, rational, and independent judgment. Even though the BBC used words like concentration camp in their narration, the footage doesn't show such things at all. And there is no concentration camp like this across the world. I believe those people have their independent judgment after watching the program. They can tell black and white, see the problem with the reporting, and come to realize the irresponsibility of the BBC as a well-known media.
There seems to be this kind of dilemma that if you don't accept their interview, you are not being transparent, you're not helping, facilitating their work. But if you accept their interview, maybe they only use a few seconds of their interview with you, or they could twist what you said into actually making their point. How do you look at this kind of dilemma?
我想这样呢，一方面还是坦诚客观的。
First, we still need to be frank and objective to media reporters coming to report on Xinjiang. Responsible media should respect facts and be objective in the reporting in Xinjiang. This is where we start. Secondly, we also hope that our media friends follow the professional ethics of journalism and report Xinjiang in a reliable, objective, and unprejudiced manner. Of course, there were many journalists, including Western journalists, who came and helped introduce Xinjiang to the world. Our attitude is to seek common ground while shelving differences. I think it's normal to have different opinions about Xinjiang, especially between people from inside and outside China. On the premise of respecting facts, I think it's perfectly fine for us to study and discuss it. That said, we are firmly against those journalists or media that deliberately distort facts and even attack and smear Xinjiang by flagrantly disregarding facts and violating professional ethics. We will debunk them on every occasion. As we often say, the truth lies in black and white. Fact is fact. The reality is Xinjiang is not something that can be easily distorted by a few filters used by media networks like BBC. After all, the majority of people in the world have discerning eyes.
Some people also say it is one thing to come and gather news materials, it is another thing to write about it and to publish it. This is what they call press freedom. They have the right to publish whatever they see fit, and you can't really interfere. How do you look at that?
It's true that they have the freedom, but such freedom should be based on the respect for facts. If a journalist confuses white with black, I don't think he is a responsible journalist. That's typical for some Western politicians. That's a breach of journalistic ethics and undermines his identity as a journalist. They are not welcome here.
It seems there is a kind of political correctness in there, and over recent years, that kind of correctness has been growing stronger and stronger. Why is that?
我认为这背后反映了西方的一些政治势力他内心的焦躁。
I think this reflects the anxiety of some political forces in the West. They want to play the Xinjiang card to contain China. But the game gets harder with the growing strength of China and the stable development of Xinjiang, which consolidates peace and harmony. They are getting very anxious. That's why the recent war of words on Xinjiang is so intense. As I said, the development of Xinjiang puts them on pins and needles. Another reason is that Xinjiang has been open and frank in its communication with the world, including international media. That has shown the vast majority of people are real Xinjiang. That makes their slander on Xinjiang nothing but a cliché. including the so-called concentration camps and persecution.
那么西方他再去污蔑说新疆存在集中营存在这个迫害等等这样一些问题只是成为他们一个口头禅了。现实是什么
What is the reality?
谁看到了
There are no such things as they allege. Has anyone seen what they claimed existed? Never.
越来越没有人信
So more peoples have started to realize the real situation in Xinjiang. So it's getting more and more difficult for their lives to survive. This also drives up their anxiety. In terms of the rhetoric and behavior, they have deviated further and further from international law and the norms of international relations, even professional ethics. At a press conference in Beijing, I said that some anti-China forces in the West have gone hysterical. They are going out of their way to attack and smear Xinjiang. However, these slurs do not wipe out the development and progress of Xinjiang. People with insight know it. More and more people have come and seen the real Xinjiang. So fewer and fewer would believe the fabricated stories. Therefore, I think it's a dead end for the West's conspiracy. Sooner or later, it's just a matter of time. When Western reporters came to Xinjiang, we treated them as friends. Besides interviews and research, we also exchanged thoughts and ideas with each other. I feel that not all these journalists are bad. They have their own thoughts on certain issues. They have their own inner worlds, and many of them are righteous people with a strong sense of justice.
他也有他自己的内心世界甚至呢，也有很多记者有自己的正义良知那么在沟通的
I asked them questions. For example, your thoughts on Xinjiang now after visiting it for yourself. Is it different from what you imagined? I have to say that these journalists were frank with their answers. They said they did not expect Xinjiang to be like this.
很坦诚的回答说新疆没想到新疆是这么一种情况。
Concerning the possibility of visiting Xinjiang, I understand there is the concern that some Western diplomats, if they're not able to talk to the high-level government official they wish to see or go to places that they wish to go to, then it doesn't make sense for them to come here. How do you react to that?
这个问题呢，我认为要把这个问题要看透。那么这个问题的真正的实质是
I think we need to see through this and understand the deep intention. Let me give you an example.
他自己也多次提出
An international organization has repeatedly expressed their wish to visit Xinjiang.
非常热诚的
We warmly and sincerely invited them.
来实地
During their visit, they requested meeting some government officials at the autonomous regional level and visiting certain places. We've made very detailed
应该
arrangements.
说我们都
But meanwhile, they put forward some unreasonable
周
demands.
到的细致的
For example, the EU
但
proposed
是
to
也
meet
有
with
一
some
些
criminals
方
in
面提出了
prison.
一些
We thought that was an
要求
unfounded and excessive request, which amounted to interference in the internal affairs of our country.
在监狱
There is a
一些
bottom
在押
line in
犯罪
terms of dealing
分
with
子
that.
那么我们认为这种呢是实际上就是在提一些苛刻的条件那么这也是对我们国家
We actually issued invitations to officials from the United Nations, European Union, and Office of the High Commissioner for Human
当然
Rights
从这
a
段
while
时间
ago,
来看
hoping they can come visit as soon as
包括
possible.
官员
Of course, on the condition that they come here to understand the real situation in Xinjiang.
实际上早就都发出了邀请
If they are here to investigate a preconceived crime or search for evidence
当然
to support their prejudice, they are wrong from the very beginning, and they are not welcomed.
这个我如果是抱着这种有罪调查式的审查式的来考察，我认为这个出发点是不对的。新疆呢也不会欢迎这样的调查。
About visits by Western diplomats or officials, there seem to be two different kind of narratives. On the one hand, China says it has repeatedly invited United Nations officials or Western officials to come and see for themselves. On the other hand, Western governments are accusing China of not allowing these officials or their diplomatic representatives to visit Xinjiang and see for themselves. Why is there such a discrepancy?
说白了就是西方有一些政客啊，从他内心里啊。
To put it bluntly, some Western politicians presume there are concentration camps in Xinjiang. To them, the visit by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights or other international organizations to Xinjiang is about uncovering secrets. This is a stubborn prejudice or perception. Speaking of that, I have to say that this is not the case in Xinjiang. Cameras in the eyes of journalists never let go of details. So many of them have visited Xinjiang. Have they ever seen a concentration camp? Is there any single one? It's far-fetched to imagine there are concentration camps in Xinjiang. We are open to international organizations, whoever comes, be it the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights or the EU. Xinjiang has never ever had concentration camps. They never existed. In fact, from 2018 to 2019, Xinjiang witnessed a boom of tourists, although this was interrupted by the pandemic in 2020. Xinjiang has hospitable people of all ethnic groups and a stunning landscape. It would be a pity to miss Xinjiang as a tourist destination. We warmly welcome all tourists and work to provide good service so that everyone can have a good time in Xinjiang.